He is one of the great rebounders, and not in the NBA sense, although he did work a lot in the NBA over his career. It is Jay Levy. He can be found on Twitter at JL23TV, heads Levy Media Productions, where he is a freelance sports producer and consultant in production. And he's got a lot of stories. Spent many years at ESPN working on a variety of top tier projects as a senior coordinating producer. And then before, he was with the PGA Tour. And this is an opportunity on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, on Twitter at Bryan Fenley, to get a deep understanding about Jay's life and how he's made all of this happen. And Jay, I really appreciate you doing this and making time. I know college basketball season is very busy for you.
Sure.
But when I think about you in the basketball sense, I look at you as a great rebounder. And I look at you as someone who's got great determination. And when you look at your career and your life as a whole, when has the tactic of being determined paid off most for you?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks, Bryan, for the opportunity. And I know we've talked much over the last year, so it's a great opportunity to be able to connect with you. As far as being determined, I think I've been that way my entire career, focused and determined on, and I'm a big goal setter, right, for what I wanted and things that I saw out there that I wanted to do. I would say, I mean, the thing that really ties into what I'm doing now and where that transition started was really back in 2010. So I had just been finishing up 8 years of overseeing Baseball Tonight and our studio baseball production group at ESPN, and got called in by my bosses and said, "Hey, we're going to take you off of Baseball Tonight and move you over to college basketball." I was like, "Okay," on the event side. And I was like, "Okay," which, of course, as everybody knows, TV is TV, but there's a big difference between studio and event, remote. So I was a little nervous at the time, but as I look back on it, what a great opportunity at the time to be able to move after 17 years of studio producing and coordinating producing at ESPN, to be able to move at that stage of my career to a whole different part of the company and learn so many new things. From, I say this to everybody all the time, it was like taking a master's class in college basketball production. I was the luckiest guy in the world as I look back on it, because I got to work with the most talented producers, directors, graphics producers, talent, associate directors, from top to bottom. And because of that opportunity and what I learned in doing that for 5 years, that really put me in a position to be able to produce games now as a freelancer after my ESPN career ended, to be able to do that. If I didn't have that opportunity, I'm not sure what I'd be doing right now, because as you know, that transition from studio to event is a challenging one, especially for a producer.
How do you feel like, Jay, you've used these last couple of years since ESPN to really reinvent yourself and to learn parts of the business that maybe you might not have tapped into if your career stayed in Bristol?
Right. And I think that's the biggest challenge, right, as a freelancer, is to be able to find those opportunities and not kind of just stay in one lane. Be able to look at things that I did at ESPN and how can I take those things that I learned at ESPN and be able to share them, right? The biggest thing from the start, when I first kind of started with the focus of really college sports and working with colleges that were doing a lot of their own on-campus broadcasting, right, for ESPN3, which is now ESPN Plus for the most part. I saw that when I was doing basketball from 2010 to 15, how that was growing, and saw a window and an opportunity to be able to come in and work with. I always thought that there's, right, especially for the college broadcast, there's two parts of the production. There's a technical side of getting everything set up, and then there's the production side. And I think most of the schools do a tremendous job on the technical side of getting it set up to do the production. But I don't think really at a lot of the schools, there's a lot of time, because they're just short-staffed and not a lot to be able to teach the production side, right? And what you need to know to be able to put a production together not just from a producer perspective, but from a replay perspective, from a graphics perspective, from a director's perspective, cameras, you're teaching students about how they cover the game and the things that you need to think about. So I saw a window of opportunity there, and that's kind of where my focus has been early on. And I've used that to be able to kind of grow and move that. So as we were talking earlier, it started when I got an opportunity through a good friend of mine, Lindsay Ross, who I worked with at ESPN, and she was at programming on college basketball when I was doing college basketball. And she helped connect me with the University of Hartford, the new AD there, to be able to work with the school and produce games with their students, which was a great opportunity. Since then, I've done games with Quinnipiac for the last 2 years, and their men's and women's games with students and university staffers who come in and work to do the games. And then I've done a lot of work with conferences, with the American Athletic Conference through my good friend Tom Ojackson, Big West, which we've been talking about, which is a project I'm working on now with Broadcast Management Group, BMG, on all their championships. So I see that as kind of my focus of what I'd like to do from a teaching perspective. And then through the work that I've done with, a good friend, Chris Farrow, who I've known for years and worked with very closely, who worked with Ross Production Services, who really gave me my first opportunities freelance producing. And so that's something I've enjoyed and continue to enjoy.
Such great people who you mentioned. Chris Farrow, one of the great guys in the business. So is Jay Levy. He joins me now on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. So in some of the roles you're doing now, Jay, you're able to teach. Like you said, you're working with a lot of students.
Sure.
And so how do you show others how proud you are of them in celebrating their successes, those who you work with, those who you've mentored, in watching them grow?
Sure. That's something that started even during my ESPN years, right? So whether you're producing or whether you become a coordinating producer in anything like that, I think it's important to be able to look, we all learn from our mistakes. I don't think anybody's ever produced a perfect show and maybe never will. So you're always constantly learning. But I think that it's important to be able to highlight the successes, right? And share the successes with the people that you're working with. If all we do is sit there and talk about the things that didn't go right, that's not a great way to continue to build and be better for the future. So I think you got to find that mix, but I think it's important to be able to, here's a good example. So for the games that I've been doing with the colleges, I can't walk into a control room at any one of those universities and think that it's going to be a production like I do with professionals, right? So that meant you can't have that mentality. The mentality is, okay, what are we capable of doing as a group, right, from the start? And what are things slowly that I can kind of bring to them and kind of teach them, show them, give them examples to be able to be better the next time. Whether it's a student, as I mentioned earlier, who's working a camera and, so if you're going to be the handheld camera underneath the basket for college basketball and there's a timeout, you're not going to take the camera and put it down on the ground, right? You're always working. But that may be the first thought, right? This is heavy. I'm going to get it off my shoulder. I'm ready to. No, you've got to, get the players walking off the court into the huddle. What are you thinking about, right? As the game is going, it's not only just producing is not only producing in the moment, it's producing for the next thing that's going to happen. So what's the next graphic? What's the next storyline? How, are we going to build a package because some guy just hit 3 threes and you want to come back out of break? It's just really kind of teaching that mentality, right? And that thought process, which is, to me, producing, again, is not just producing from the producer chair. Everybody's producing. You're producing graphics, you're producing replays, whatever it is, you're thinking like a producer and what's next in the broadcast, if that makes sense.
So it does. So what I'm inferring from what you're saying is that you might always just have that producing mindset with you, even if you're not producing a game, which takes me to my next question. And that is, let's say you are watching a broadcast as a fan. So let's say you invite a couple people over. We're all on the couch watching a college basketball game. You don't have to work it. But
Right.
What am I going to hear from you? Because I know that you, in watching the game, will not be able to turn off that producing gene that is innate in you.
No, sure. I mean, I think any sporting event, We were talking earlier. I think the reason we all got into this business is because we're fans, right? Sports fans, and are lucky to be able to take our sports fandom and be able to make it our careers, which is, everybody wants to find that job that they love. I have had that, and continue to have that. As I'm sitting there watching an event, I'm always watching to learn, right? I think it's first and foremost, I'm watching. I did that at ESPN. You're watching other people's studio shows. You're watching other people's events. What are they doing? What are things that they're doing that you may like, that you want to bring to your group? You're constantly evolving. I mentioned earlier, my brother, Mark, who is 22 months younger. We were a year apart in school. He was a year behind me. He works at NBC Sports and has been there. So I started at ESPN in '93 in the summer. He started at NBC and is still there. And he started in the spring of '93. So we talk constantly, but there are things that I see even from NBC or things that he works on, and I'll text him. The other day from the Super Bowl, I'll text him about a graphic that I saw or an animation or whatever, a feature that I saw during the Olympics that he works on. I think you're always constantly learning from what you're seeing. And I think that's how we evolve and how we get better. So that's probably what you would hear. I don't want to be that guy who sits there and watches the TV show and is like, hey, did you see that bad cut? Did you see that? I'm sure I've done that in my career. I'm sure they've done that. My wife probably is not happy that I've brought it up while she's watching it. But I think I watch as a fan, mostly Yankee games. I think that's my biggest fandom from growing up. But other sports that I watch just as a fan, I'm also watching as a producer.
You're also a big fan of your daughter and her as an athlete. I want to touch on that in just a moment. But from the perspective of you in having your brother who also works in the business,
sure.
What is the sibling rivalry like even to this day between you two?
Sure. And honestly, I know it'll sound very boring, but there's not really a rivalry. So really the story starts back in 1986. December of 1986, when he and I were both hired by a production company in New York City that did work for the PGA Tour. It was called Reed Dolph Incorporated, did Inside the PGA Tour and a lot of other things for the PGA Tour. Donna Orender, former commissioner of the WNBA, was the senior production person there. Literally, my brother and I came in, interviewed the same day. I had just finished up working at the University of Florida in their sports information office and came back up north to look for a job. And we came in, interviewed at the same day and got the job at the same time, hired us together to both be production assistants for this company. And from that point forward, I think there's just been kind of a mutual admiration. As proud as I am of everything that I accomplished, right, from the time that I first started working in my 23 years at ESPN and now, I'm equally, if not more proud of what he's accomplished in all his years at NBC and through the years he did golf and all the years he did the Olympics and produced the Opens to the Olympics and everything that he does now. Seeing his name in credits as they're rolling at the end of the Olympics, that's kind of neat. That's your brother. That's who you grew up with, right? That's who you played sports with. And now to see that is kind of neat. So competitive, yes. We have a third brother, a younger brother. So we're all competitive, especially in golf, although they're way better than I am. But no, mutual admiration and sharing a lot of, what we do. My career primarily was in studio. His was an event. And then when I moved over to an event in 2010, then we had more things to talk about in similarities. Yeah.
A lot of similarities, a lot of shared admiration. But what's different about your viewpoint within the business compared to his?
Sure. I think that it really depends. I think it's all based on kind of what you were involved in and what you worked on. His work primarily, like I said, at NBC was focused on golf. He worked the golf tour, and that's what first started off of what we had done for the PGA Tour down in Jacksonville. And then has done a lot of Olympics, something I'm very envious of because it started in 1996 in Atlanta when he produced Dick Enberg's features all the way to this year, right? In the Winter Olympics that just were concluded. So I think just different perspective, right? I worked primarily 17 years on studio shows, and whether it was Sports Center, or Baseball Tonight, or all the other shows that I worked on, it's just a different viewpoint and a different perspective. But I think that we share a lot of the inside part of production and talk about that, and it's nice to be able to have that built in, right? I had that at ESPN with a lot of my colleagues and very close friends that I continue to talk to this day, and glean so much information, and just going over to their office and having a conversation with a Tim Corrigan or an Ed Placey or Barry Sachs, whatever, so many names. But to have your brother who you could just call on the cell phone, right, and be able to share that is kind of neat and special. And yeah.
Jay Levy is my guest on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. So your brother works a lot with the Olympics. You have a daughter that might be headed to the Olympics one day. Could be. She is an all-star gymnast, still in high school. You talk about fandom and how worlds collide. You as a fan, you working high-profile events and what that means.
Sure.
But what about you as the sports fan of your daughter and her athletic pursuits? What does that look like from your perspective?
Both kids. So I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old daughter, Rachel, and a 12-year-old son, Asher, who is a big baseball guy. So it's great to be a sports fan and then be able to be the dad, right? And to be able to share in both of their sports journeys. The gymnastics, I don't think I ever thought my entire life I would be a gym dad. But have become a gym dad and love being a gym dad. Sitting there watching, Friday night SEC gymnastics on the SEC network, or, going to all the meets that we've gone to all over the country and watching her compete and have the success that she had to this point is amazing, right? Different perspective with my son and through his baseball and through Little League, where I've been able to be an assistant coach on a lot of the teams and been more hands-on and being able to work with him in that respect. And he's left-handed, I'm left-handed, so that kind of helps a little bit for him. But so similar but different, right? I couldn't do anything that my daughter does, not even close, and have an amazing respect for what gymnasts go through and what they do to be able to compete. We saw that with Simone Biles and everything that she went through in the last Olympics, and I can full on appreciate hearing those stories and understanding that. So it's great as a parent to be able to see your kids be able to do something that they love and get enjoyment out of it, whether it's sports or anything else, is fabulous. But the gymnastics has been quite the fun ride. As I was mentioning earlier, she went to the University of Georgia gymnastics camp last summer. She wants to go back this year. So early July, we're heading back to Athens, and it's a great experience. And look, if my career hadn't changed, right, at the end of 2015, when things went a different direction with ESPN and now with what I'm doing, I don't know if I necessarily have the time or as much time. That's been the silver lining a little bit in this, that as a freelancer, I've had more time to be able to be home, right, and be able to do more things. If I was at ESPN working the hours I was working and traveling and doing shows, you're not always available to be able to do those kind of family things. So I don't lose sight of that. It's not how I had planned it out and how I wanted it, but you know what? It's been a great little silver lining.
And knowing that you have been able to spend more time with her, how does she show her appreciation for you?
Oh, I don't know. I think that's a tough question. I don't know if it's appreciation. I think just with either of them, right? Just whether it's the rides home, we have about a half-hour ride, 35-minute ride to and from practice, and I do a lot of picking up and driving home. Those opportunities just to sit there, and especially as she's gotten older, to be able to have different conversations, right? Those are special times to be able to have that 35 minutes, 5 nights a week, to be able to do that. Same, going with my son to baseball tournaments or to his Little League games and be able to share that both on the field as a coach and driving to the game, talking about baseball, watching a baseball game. I got married a little bit later in life, so my kids are a little bit younger compared to all the years that I worked in the business. But when he kind of got a sense of what I did, and he would sit there playing MLB The Show and talk about players, that was like, oh yeah, Dave Winfield. I worked with Dave Winfield at ESPN. Or he would like, you worked with Dave Wynn. So it's interesting to see when those worlds collide, right? Your family life and your career, and to be able to share that with sports is fabulous.
You've encouraged both of your kids so much. How have they returned the favor, and how do they encourage you, not just in life, but in your career endeavors as well?
No, sure. Family support. Family is first and foremost to me, has always been and will always be. Um, this last 6 years have definitely been challenging and a lot different than the prior 23, right, at ESPN. A little bit different when you kind of have a sense of your schedule and what you'll be working on for a period of time, and when you can schedule vacations and stuff like that. My wife, Laura, and the kids, I can't say enough of their flexibility and their support through all of this, right? Because it's definitely been different, not knowing what your next event will be, or when that's going to happen, or suddenly you've got multiple events coming up at the same time and you're not going to be home, and that puts, more on my wife for being able to pick up the kids, take them to this event, take them. So there's that shared responsibility as a parent, but so the support that they've given me to be able to do, because it was a big discussion early on when I ended up leaving ESPN through the layoffs, and then figuring out what I was going to do next. I could have easily done a similar type job and picked the family up and moved them. And we just decided, I sat down and we talked and said, look, we love where we live here in Connecticut. The kids are have an established life. We have an established life. Let's try this freelance thing and stay here and make it work. But that doesn't come without support, and that doesn't come without other people giving up their certain things that they do to be able to allow you to do what you do, right? So I've been very lucky. I've been lucky my entire life, but it's continued through this.
With a lot of luck comes a lot of talent on your part. Jay Levy is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. So the family support has been invaluable to what you've been able to do, especially as I open up this conversation and talked about the great rebound, in that how you've been able to change your perspective in ways in where it was going and how it's turned into something really special here. And you've obviously done a lot of college basketball, and you talked about dealing with events and maybe not having as many when you were kind of coming off ESPN. Sure. But now, and I've seen you have this left-hander schedule book. It's like this, I saw you post this, and it's got your calendar and everything like that.
That's a Hanukkah gift every year for my wife.
Is it? I got a feeling that it's been pretty busy. You've been writing a lot of different things in there with that left hand of yours. And just to know that, and then looking back at where it was when you didn't have all of that, I guess reflecting on that,
sure.
How does that sit with you?
Oh, it sits great. As I said earlier, I mean, the things that I got to do at ESPN over the 23 years, right, between studio and event, and as we talked earlier about some of the events that I covered and the people I got to work with, and those are memories that will stay with me forever. I was very, very fortunate, very lucky, and worked hard for those opportunities, but very fortunate, very lucky. What I've been able to create now, I take as much pride as I did in anything that I ever worked at ESPN, because maybe it's a little bit harder, right? At ESPN, my goal was take whatever assignment I was given, do it to the best of my ability, make it better make it better when I leave it than I did when I got it. And that was my mentality at ESPN constantly, and continued to strive for bigger and better and whatever was next. Here, I had to basically build it from scratch. And the support that I've had with former people from ESPN, right? So I mentioned earlier, whether it's the Barry Saxes and, Chris Farrow and other people that have been there to be able to help support me, right, as I'm continuing to build this new part of my career, and given opportunities. And then you take those opportunities and you build off of them. Not only just the producing. So we talked about the production consulting. I mean, some of the work that I've done with the American Athletic Conference over the last couple of years with Tom Ojakshian and their staff, helping them when they got the first deal with ESPN to do on-campus broadcasting, which they've done for the last couple of years on ESPN Plus, and to kind of, again, offer my experiences to help build the framework of what they were going to do. And then the other thing is, and this came out of left field a little bit. I had been really signed on to do that. And they moved their offices from Providence to Dallas, Texas. And in their new facility, they wanted to build a control room and a new studio, and really didn't have anybody with the production experience to do it. So they asked me if I would take over the project. And I was like, sure, I would love the opportunity. And then I thought to myself, I was like, my God, I've been in control rooms and studios my entire life, and I have no idea how they get put together. And once again, you learn, you speak to people, you glean information, and you read up, study, and then use the experience that you have and worked with them to be able to create the studio that you now see that Morgan Uber, when she fronts a lot of their pieces and studio shows and stuff, and that was one of the neat things of all the things I ever accomplished, in my career. I helped build a studio that's sitting there in their offices in Dallas that they use, and that was pretty neat. So I don't think at this stage of my career, I'm open to anything, right? I think you have to be. You have to be open to any opportunity of where you can take something from my many years of experience, and how can you take that and help somebody build what they are looking to build, or help them with their goals and productions.
Not only, Jay, as we wrap this up, are you a good rebounder, but you're also a good gymnast, in the sense that, sure, your daughter is an actual gymnast, but you having to be flexible as well in a different way. But as you pointed out, it's worked out great for you. And it all goes back to this motto that I know that you are big on. And that is, sometimes the hardest thing in life is learning how to be comfortable when things are uncomfortable. And if there's anybody who embodies that in these last couple of years, it's been you. And so as I spotlight you, I want people to realize just how powerful your message is, how you've been able to reinvent yourself, and how proud we are in the ability for you to take an obstacle and then find the silver lining in it,
right?
The dad aspect, but then also get back to doing what you love, and that is sports.
I mean, as we wrap this up, I think the thing that I learned, right, as my ESPN career ended and this new career began, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of former coaches and managers, right, at ESPN through many different sports. And I think all of them, to a person, really said the same thing to me when the transition came about, which is, you really got two choices, right? These are the people who've changed jobs, been fired, gotten other jobs. You have two choices. You can sit there and feel sorry for yourself, or you can move forward. And sitting there and feeling sorry for yourself is really not an option. It's not the way I have gone through my entire career. It's not the way I built my career. And now my thought process is, you're right. Yeah, you can sit there and wonder what if or why or all those things that go through your head. But in the end, you can't change. And I say this to my kids all the time. You can't change what happened, but you can change what will happen in the future. What happened in the past and what that can never be taken from you, but it can't be changed. What you have control of is tomorrow and today and the next thing that you get to do and work on. And that's the way I've kind of looked at my entire career, which is be better tomorrow, right? Be better in the next day than you were yesterday. And I think that's what it's about. We all learn and we all grow. And we talked about it earlier, but be better in the next opportunity you have than you were the previous one.
And you can't get much better than what Jay Levy has done and is doing. Check out all of his work. Obviously, he's on Twitter. You can follow him there. Levy Media Productions at JL23TV, freelance sports producer, production consultant. He does it all. An incredible story. Jay, I'm Bryan Fenley. Thank you so much for opening up and talking about the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows, the roller coaster that it can be, but your determination pays off. And I want people to see that, because you are one great rebounder.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Bryan. Thanks for the time. Really enjoyed it.